choices. We can make different decisions. But what we need is what Plato talked about in line 24a, Plato's Apology. When Socrates is about to go off jail, to be executed, to drink the hemlock. And Socrates says, the cause of my unpopularity is what the Greeks call parrhesia, frank speech, plain speech, unintimidated speech, fearless speech, and what is missing too much in our public life, the impoverished public life that's left, given the privatizing tendencies of our culture. If we don't have enough fearless, unintimidated, frank, plain speech. And I would not be standing here as part of a tradition of a terrorized and traumatized and stigmatized black people if there were not the Sojourner Truths and Harriet Tubman and A. Philip Randolphs and Marcus Garvey and Martin King and Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer and Stokely Carmichaels who straightened their backs up and said, we are unafraid to tell the truth, and the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. And we'll talk about it in relation to the prison-industrial complex. We'll talk about it in relation to indecent housing. We'll talk about it in relation to decrepit school systems. We'll talk about it in relation to not enough jobs with a living wage. We'll talk about it in terms of any set of elites who are too unaccountable and too irresponsible and think that somehow they can get away with being indifferent and callous to the least of these, the most weak and the vulnerable, especially our poor brothers and sisters. That's the question of Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. Where is the love? Where is it? Because when you really love folk, you can't stand the fact of being treated unjustly. When you really love folk, you loathe the fact that they're being treated unfairly. And if you don't speak plain and frank, and that raises a larger issue of leadership. Dear brother, Pastor Tony Montero, so good to see you, my brother. I know you're in trouble right now at Temple University. Love you, respect you. But it's a question of just raising voices. Thank God for Angela Davis. Thank God for Glenn Lowry. Thank God for Louis Raquan. Thank God for Bruce Wesley. Thank God for Sister Michelle Alexander, who has written the secular biblical text that's come to terms with the new Jim Crow, right when America's supposedly moving into an era of color blindness and post-racial status. You say, please, get off the symbolic crack pipe. You looked at the suffering among the weak and vulnerable in America. See it escalating year after year after year. And talking about mass incarceration, we actually are talking about a Marshall Plan that has been at work. A Marshall Plan of billions and billions and billions of dollars. Almost $500 billion invested in hyper-mass incarceration. But when it comes to quality education, you can't find a penny. When it comes to decent housing, can't find a penny. When it comes to jobs with a living wage, can't find a penny. When it comes to health care, hardly find a penny. We got budgetary limitations. Oh, but when it comes to that prison-industrial complex, and when it comes to wars abroad in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya, all of a sudden the money starts flowing. Why? Because not only we live in a society deeply shaped, disproportionately influenced by big money, big banks, and big corporations, but it reflects the priorities of a society. Yeah. Thank God you got enough visionary, courageous folk here at the University of Pennsylvania that say, even given the three dominant tendencies at work in America and around the world, which is financializing, privatizing, and militarizing, that's where the money goes. 1% of the population owns 42% of the wealth. 1% of the population got 95% of the income growth in the last 5 years. Occupy movement was no joke when they talked about the 1%. They were telling the truth. And their kids get taught, poor kids get tested. Their kids get treated the way the precious kids in Finland get treated. tremendous arts programs, science and technology, their imagination to be piqued, their intelligence to be affirmed, and told every week, you're brilliant, whether it's true or not. You're brilliant, you're brilliant, you're brilliant. Believe in yourself. Finland only has 2% of their children living in poverty. We got 40% of children of color living in poverty. That's a crime against humanity. It's a moral disgrace. It's an obscenity. It's a spiritually profane condition. And if you don't feel it in your gut, then you're wrestling with a certain kind of callousness and indifference. Because when it comes to your neighborhood, all of a sudden you become militant. Oh, but you see, I come from a tradition that tells me that every neighborhood has the same status. And every child has the same status. So if there was mass incarceration taking place on the vanilla side of town, everybody knows there'd be a qualitatively different discourse and practice. We know that. That's a given. Even the corporate media would kick in. Fox News and MSNBC. Right-wing propaganda and the neoliberal propaganda kick in. Oh, we need to have town meetings about this mass incarceration because Johnny McGillicuddy's going to jail. Susan too. 22% of our children living in poverty, all colors, each one precious. That's a crime against humanity too. Long-term wrestling with structural institutional practices that generate unacceptable levels of poverty and inequality. Short-term, trying to break the consensus that somehow we can give a priority to the prison-industrial complex and wars and not public goods tied to public life. Like this particular grand gathering today, part of a public conversation. I was glad to see a variety of different voices here. That's very important. But we have to be honest and candid with each other. And be clear of the lens through which we're looking at the world. What visions we have of the world. And therefore we have to have serious wrestling with not just levels of poverty, but also, as the brother said in the back, issues of character, the spiritual poverty. What happens 3 generations of young black and brown brothers, not just stopped and frisked in New York and Philadelphia and Los Angeles, not just going to schools where they have to go through security checks every day and then get there, and there's no arts programs and the test scores are going to be the determining factor of their trajectory. They understand very clearly that they don't have significant value in that society. Then they're thrown out into the streets with what options? And yes, they do make choices. And yes, many of them make very good choices. Too many of them make bad choices. But what is the condition of their souls? Du Bois was talking about the social and the spiritual, the existential and the economic, the personal and the political. They go hand in hand. Issues of character and vision and virtue go hand in hand. But that's true also for those on the top. That's true for those who have more wealth and power and status. What kind of character do you see on Wall Street? Well, Martin Scorsese gave us a version of it, didn't he? In The Wolf of Wall Street. Well, he was hyperbolic and exaggerating, yes, but he's a serious artist. Leonardo is no joke. As an actor, it's a form of spiritual malnutrition and moral constipation. And the question is, how do you shatter the callousness and the indifference and convince them your destiny is inextricably interwoven with those of Jamal and Letitia and Juan and Juanita on the poor side of town. And here the issues of class become very important. Because there once was a time in Black America where there were more voices to be unafraid and unintimidated and speak the truth. But now everybody's for sale. Just like everything is for sale. Too many leaders for sale that don't want to tell the truth. So we know if, for example, there was mass incarceration among the black middle class and upper middle class at the same level there's been for our black poor brothers and sisters, there'd be different